Hello, I'm Alison from Guides for Brides. And with the news this week that social distancing restrictions are going to be in place for some time, I'm here really to talk to those couples that have got weddings planned for later on in 2020, particularly July and August, but right the way through September, October to the end of the year, just to talk about how this might impact your wedding and just to help you with that really, really difficult decision you'll be making at the moment as to whether your wedding can go ahead as planned, whether you're wanting it to go ahead, and what the different options are to you, and perhaps most importantly, what a wedding in the summer of 2020 is likely to look like and what challenges you might be facing. So first of all, perhaps the most important thing is, will weddings be able to take place? Well, what we know is during the current lockdown, weddings aren't allowed. So there are no weddings at all taking place. And until the lockdown is lifted, that's not going to change. However, during social distancing, which was in place before the lockdown, there were weddings taking place, and different venues and churches and registrars had different approaches just to make sure that the bride, the groom, the witnesses, they themselves as officiants and the guests were all kept safe. So we are likely to go back to a degree to that, but quite how much of a normal wedding will be allowed in the immediate aftermath of lockdown is quite unclear at the moment. So from the point of view of the actual wedding, civil ceremonies and civil partnerships do rely on a registrar. Now they are at the moment very busy with registering births, registering deaths, and that does need to be their priority at the moment. It can mean that for those that haven't yet given notice of marriage, which is the process you need to go through in order to get the license to marry, you do need to have given at least 29 days notice. So registrars are operating with phone appointments and video appointments. You don't need a face-to-face meeting for that, but they do obviously need to be open and able to set up that appointment with you. So if it's less than 29 days after lockdown, you may have a problem there. Speak to your registrar by email. They're all working from home. So they are working, but working from home. Every registration district is different, so there's not a norm. Some are planning to be back to normal very, very quickly. Some are expecting disruption to go on a little bit longer. It's unlikely to be easier just to change to a statutory wedding. So the statutory marriage is in a register office. It's just a very simple ceremony. It still requires a registrar. You still need to give a notice. So it's not going to really solve a problem by switching to that. If you're getting married in a church, you are probably worrying that your banns can't be read during lockdown, and how long will the churches remain closed during social distancing? Now, the good news there, the Archbishop of Canterbury is able to grant a special licence for you to marry. So you'll need to apply online. It's very easy to find the website, or we've got a link in the articles on our website. So apply online, allow plenty of time, but obviously don't start applying now for weddings in months and months and months ahead. Wait to see how things go. They would rather banns were read in church as normal if that can happen. Exactly the same applies if it is a requirement that you habitually attend church there for 6 months before the wedding. If you've been unable to do that, but you've done everything you can, then they will allow you to apply for a special licence. If you're worried about whether the actual wedding ceremony itself can go ahead, think about talking to a celebrant. There are a lot of celebrants that can do a really, really nice symbolic marriage. It is symbolic. There is nothing legal about it. That does then mean that you can have whatever you want in the way of vows and content. So you can have some religious content in there if you're wanting to. It can be entirely humanist. It can be the ceremony you want. There are plenty of celebrants out there that can help, or there's no reason why you can't just recruit your best man or a family friend to play the role of the celebrant. It might not be as polished as having a professional there, but it does allow that little backup breakup clause. Just remember to do the legal bit and get married when everything is back to normal, or your marriage won't be legal. So that's the actual legal wedding itself. Now, some couples are asking, will my guests want to attend? And what they're noticing quite often is if they've already sent the invitations out, there aren't the RSVPs coming back in. It doesn't mean your guests don't want to attend. And in fact, what we usually notice is that if a guest isn't able to attend, and they're definitely not going to be able to come, they'll be the ones that are quite quick to reply. So all of those ones that haven't replied, it's because they're trying to figure out whether it's going to be possible, whether they're going to be able to travel, whether they're going to be well enough to travel, and so on. So they probably have full intention of coming. They're just waiting until slightly nearer the time. So please don't be despondent. Will they want the wedding to go ahead? Absolutely yes. Particularly those guests that you're probably really worried about. So perhaps elderly relatives or the vulnerable or guests coming from overseas. They will want your wedding to happen. They would feel awful if it didn't happen because of them. So there's ways to keep in touch with them. You'll be able to set up a Zoom. They'll be able to watch your wedding online. Hopefully you've got a videographer lined up. You're going to have a great photographer. They'll be able to relive that with you afterwards. And we're going to be looking at lots of different ways that you can involve your guests as the time gets a little bit closer and weddings are happening again. So they will want to get involved. They will be ready for a party. So those that can attend will be really exciting that your wedding is going ahead. Will your venue want you to go ahead? I'd say absolutely yes. Their first priority, obviously, is going to be to make sure it is safe for your wedding to happen. They're going to want to make sure you're safe, your guests are safe, and also that their team of staff there at the venue are all going to be safe. So once they've put the measures in place, they're going to be really keen to get back to what they love doing and having fantastic weddings at their venue. So they will be working with you to make sure it will happen. They'll be putting various contingency plans in place. Do not panic if they're a little bit difficult to get hold of at the moment. Most venues have got a system in place for contacting all of their current couples, so those that are getting married in April, in May, in June. They're sorting out all of their immediate requirements first before speaking to couples for July, August, September and later on in the year, partly to allow you to buy a little bit more time to be able to make a decision, partly because a lot of their team have been furloughed. They're obviously trying to make sure they save costs so that they can really focus their finances on what's important. So it might mean they're not as quick to respond. Use their email systems, leave messages, and they will get back to you. Any problems at all, do contact us. If we represent them on our website, we've usually got contact details. We speak to them all regularly, so we will know how to get in contact with them. So if you have any concerns, just ping us an email and we can follow up on that. What about your suppliers? Will your suppliers be keen for your wedding to go ahead? Those suppliers that are going to be there on the day in particular. This isn't so much about the more remote suppliers, so the wedding cake suppliers, the florists and so on, who can deliver their service in advance. It's the photographer, the videographer, your musicians, your wedding planner, the people that will need to be there. They will be the first to tell you if they're not comfortable attending. So if for some reason they are needing to shield, they will let you know, and they will probably already be putting a plan in place for a colleague to work with you instead, or to make some other arrangement. But on the whole, they will be really, really keen for it to happen. They are going to be key to your wedding going smoothly. Things are going to be different for your wedding day, and it's really important to have some really good suppliers around you. So if you're not already using a wedding planner and you were thinking you might just want one for on the day, now's the time to put that in place. If you're thinking, do I need 2 photographers or just one, get that second photographer. You're not going to want them to miss anything, because there will be some guests that can't be there and will want to see those photos. Your suppliers will all be thinking about different innovative ways that they can make your wedding work when you can't do things in the normal way. So photographers, for example, will be looking at setting up backdrops so that you can have the group photograph done as a collage rather than cramming everyone onto the lawn together or at the bottom of the stairs. It'll be individual shots all put together on a collage. Those sort of more creative ideas to achieve what you're wanting. So those suppliers will be happy being there, or they will let you know if not. Perhaps the most important thing, though, in the decision as to whether it's going to go ahead is how the two of you feel about it. So forget what anyone else is thinking. Think about what your wedding day means to you. Forget the preconceptions. Forget about what you've been thinking for the last few months or years or since you're 8 years old of what your wedding day might be. But just think about what it is in the context of 2020. And that will really, really help guide your decision. So what do I mean by that? If your wedding is all about having a big party with 150 guests and dancing all night, it's probably going to be compromised in the current situation. There are going to be people that will be anxious about coming. It might be difficult having a gathering of that size. That size gathering just might not be allowed. So just think about whether you have a more intimate wedding now and then hold off the party until later on when everyone's really in the mood for that party. If having an amazing wedding day is more about being with your close family and friends and spending really quality time together, that's not going to be compromised at all. You're still going to be able to have that. In fact, it's probably going to be all the more valuable, that family time now. People will really, really appreciate that chance to get together in a more intimate group. So those smaller weddings, under 50 guests, are quite likely to be able to go ahead. You may find that if that is the number restriction, and there has been talk that that might be a restriction, that 50 guests may be the accepted size wedding that can take place. It is just speculation, but at the moment that is looking like the most likely. If that is the case, you'll find that naturally some of your guests can't attend anyway. You will probably find it's very easy to bring those numbers down. And people will understand, they'll know that you're being given that difficult decision. So bring it down to close family and friends if you can. 50 is a great number for a wedding. Everyone that I've ever spoken to who's had these smaller weddings with 20, 30, 40, 50 guests absolutely love that extra intimacy and the fact they managed to speak to everyone. So don't feel that you're compromising anything. And perhaps last of all, if the wedding is really just about the two of you getting married, then that can happen. As soon as weddings are allowed again, you will probably be the first to be wanting to make sure that happens. The party, the celebration can happen later. And that very, very often happens anyway with weddings from couples that are getting married across different continents where there are visa issues in place, that the actual big party happens perhaps a year after the wedding's taken place. So go ahead with the wedding if you can. If you feel it's not going to be a wedding without some of the elements that will be restricted, then think again. There are the financial considerations as well. And I know a lot of people are saying, anxious about paying full price and only having half a wedding. It will only be half a wedding if that's what you make it. So embrace the new wedding if that's the plan. If you're planning to go ahead, embrace how it's going to be now, and it won't feel like half a wedding at all. It'll feel like an incredibly special day as it should. If you are planning to postpone, generally if you are postponing to later on this year or midweek, most venues and caterers are allowing you just to carry the booking over. Not all, and it does vary. The busier ones, inevitably the more popular ones, are really, really restricted on dates, and sometimes it's just not possible if you're giving up your original date voluntarily, because remember, your wedding can almost certainly go ahead later on this year. It is a voluntary postponement. If you're giving up that date voluntarily, do expect that you will probably need to pay something else to move it to another date, particularly if you're wanting another really popular date. So there may be cost implications. There is not an accepted norm anymore. To start off with, it was a lot of venues were charging an extra 25%. Some are charging entirely the full charge of the wedding again. Some are charging just the deposit. Some aren't charging at all. It really does depend on that individual venue. And and I'm sure there will be some wrangling with insurance and so on later. But at the moment, the best thing to do is speak to your venue, negotiate with your venue, see what they can do. And they will be trying to help, and they will have a policy in place to help their couples as much as possible. So, next question is, if your numbers are restricted, so quite a few people asking whether their venue will allow them to reduce the number of guests who are at their wedding. They've perhaps signed a contract for a minimum of 100 guests. They're worried that some of their guests won't be able to attend, or that they might be forced to cut the numbers down. We don't know what the situation will be with insurance if the government says 50 or less guests and your contract is for 100 or more guests. So again, best thing to do is speak to your venue. In most cases, it's not so much about minimum numbers, it's about the minimum spend. So they will have factored in the fact that that number of guests brings that level of spend for the wedding, and that's what they need to be able to cover all of their running costs. So talk about ways that you can perhaps make changes to the wedding day. Can you change from that 3-course meal to a 5-course meal? Can you perhaps give some choices on the menu? Can you upgrade from Prosecco to champagne? Are there any other changes along those lines that you would be able to make that might just help solve that problem? So, invitations. Quite a lot of chat online about when to send invitations. The norm is 8 weeks before the wedding. Most of us don't know what's going to be happening in 8 days, let alone 8 weeks. So that's perhaps not something that can happen at the moment. And as we know, for those that did send their invitations out, perhaps in early March, before we realised the implications of coronavirus, they're finding that people can't reply anyway. So take the pressure off your guests by keeping in touch with them. You can have fun on there's online apps like Canva that you can really quickly and easily do a funky invitation and just do a save the date, we think, have a little bit of fun with it, keep them up to date, perhaps send a weekly update on where you are. They will be wondering what's happening, they'll be worrying about you, and for you to be able to just keep in touch with them, make sure they've kept the date in the diary if it's all going ahead, and then as it comes nearer to the day, my goodness, they're going to be so happy when that invitation formally lands on their doorstep and they know that the wedding's definitely happening. So hold off, keep them informed, and that should work really, really well. Will you have your dress in time? It depends where it was coming from. It's really nice for those of us that really support the British bridal industry to be able to say that those that were buying British and supporting the industry here are the ones that are coming out on top here. So production hasn't particularly been interrupted. Obviously, those that were buying imported dresses, a lot were coming from China and a lot were coming from northern Italy, and both of those areas there have been some supply chain issues. Having said that, most people order their dresses a long time in advance. Most bridal boutiques put that order in as soon as you place it, and it seems an unnecessarily long time when you do place that order weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. But it's to allow for all possible things to go wrong. And this is the sort of thing that could have gone wrong, a supply chain issue. So you'll probably find you're okay. You'll probably find that your dress is in that bridal boutique already. It's carefully in storage. It's waiting for your dress fittings to come around. Now, during lockdown, obviously, we can't be doing dress fittings, so that's not possible at the moment. But as soon as it is allowed, the bridal boutiques will be looking for ways that they can do that while still allowing for social distancing. It is going to be a challenge, and I think as a bride it's really important for you to be led by your bridal boutique on this. They will know how long the seamstress needs to make the alterations. They might want you to wait until much closer than usual to your wedding date for two reasons. Number one, to avoid unnecessary alterations. So doing something now, needing to change nearer the time. And secondly, because body shapes are changing quite a lot at the moment. A lot of us are working out a lot more than we would normally. A lot of us are perhaps stress eating. A lot of us aren't eating at all because we're so stressed. So body shapes are changing a little bit. It is crazy to do alterations for your dress 2 months before you're needing it. So be guided by them. They will tell you when the seamstress needs to do it. And that will mean hopefully it's just one dress fitting that's needed. If you haven't already sorted your bridesmaids' dresses, that's going to be quite hard to get them together. They may need to compromise a little more than they might have otherwise. So great opportunity for you to say to them, look, current situation, this is what you're wearing, that's it. Makes life a little bit easier. So don't let yourself be pulled into that strain. Good opportunity to ditch that as a problem. Flowers. Will you be able to have the flowers that you planned? It depends on what you had planned. So there is a little bit of an issue with supply. It's obviously hard to harvest flowers. We're hearing about whole crops of tulips being left just to be ruined because they can't harvest flowers as they would usually at the moment. So just think about seasonal flowers. Put your trust in your florists. They are really, really, really creative people. They are artists first and foremost. If you are really set in what you are wanting, you may find that you're disappointed on the day. So it's one of those things where it's quite important just to give your florist real guidance on what you love, what you perhaps don't like so much, and then let them do the magic. So let them be creative. They'll be able to sort seasonal flowers. They'll be able to achieve the effect that you're wanting. But the more flexibility you give them, the better on that. Things like your wedding cake isn't going to be hugely affected. You may find, for example, that cupcakes perhaps are slightly less popular because people can pick them up and back, and cake designs where people are tempted to touch them, perhaps we're going to be seeing a few less of those for a little while, but generally the cake supply is not going to be affected, and there's no issue with getting ingredients and so on. From the cake artists that I've been speaking to over the last few weeks, they're really, really enjoying having all of this extra time to make amazing sugar flowers. So we're looking forward to seeing some fantastic creations this summer. Those of you that have already ordered your wedding cake will probably find there's a lot more time going into those amazing sugar flowers than usually would be. One aspect of the wedding that may be unfortunately impacted is going to be transport. So at the moment, certainly for funerals, although obviously the hearse is allowed, the cars for any mourners aren't allowed. And that's because of social distancing, just isn't possible in the confined space of a car. So if it is important to you that you arrive in style, start thinking about that now. How might that be if wedding transport just isn't possible? So think about, can you switch to a vintage bus? Is there a horse-drawn carriage? Can you borrow somebody's soft-top car? Can you think creatively? There will be something that you can do to arrive in style. Be sympathetic to the car hire companies, please. If you can arrange that car to do something else instead, rather than going to them and asking for the deposit back when they're already going to be struggling, it's a really, really kind thing to do to the industry. So just think about whether actually that amazing vintage car you'd booked, that when this is all over, that you arrange for that car to go and pick up Granny to bring her around to see your photo album, or to take you to the airport if that's appropriate, depending on the sort of car. So just think if there is something. I know finances are tight for everyone at the moment, but where a particular part of the industry is hit like that, it's always nice if you can just think of something else you might be able to use that service for if you can't use it for what you'd originally booked. Should you be making adjustments to your day? My goodness, definitely. And look at it as a positive. This is your chance to totally throw out the rule books, get rid of all of those traditions that perhaps you weren't really embracing anyway. Not many people want that formal receiving line now. So, if you'd got somebody suggesting you should have, that's the opportunity to say, no, can't be doing that now. But think about all of the other things. Why should your wedding be like everyone else's has been, every other wedding you've been to for the last few years? Why can't you now use this opportunity to do it your way? So think about what your perfect day would be. What would that feel like? There are going to be changes that almost certainly will need to be made. And at the moment, all of those suppliers and the venues and caterers in particular are looking at different things that they can do. So the sort of things that you'll be thinking about are going to be for the actual reception. You may well need a little bit more space between tables, and you may need less guests on the table. So what does that mean to you? It means there's more space for amazing floral decorations, for theming the venue a little bit, for perhaps spilling out of that one room into other rooms within the venue and encouraging guests to move around between tables. Perhaps even spilling out onto the lawn or into a marquee where you were thinking, we're going to have to stay inside just in case it rains. Your guests will like the spontaneity of you choosing to spill out onto the grass and then all having to come back in if it doesn't quite work. If you've got an outdoor venue, you're lucky. So these are the venues that have got lovely outdoor spaces that perhaps aren't used enough because we're also nervous about the English summer. So use that space, have it as your plan A and have the indoor as your contingency plan. It allows everyone to have a lot of extra space to move around. Talk to your venue about whether instead of having 10 people around a table, can you have some picnic rugs? Can you hire in some picnic tables? Do they have some picnic tables or clusters of chairs? Could you be having hampers in the garden? Can you do something different for your wedding catering? So just think about all of the different opportunities. Talk to your venue. They will be really happy to have your ideas to mix in with their ideas as well. So share with them any ideas, any thoughts of what you think you want your wedding to be like, because remember, this is a learning curve for them as well as you. They're all sharing great ideas. There's a lot of forums. We're talking to them a lot. We're organising webinars so that venues can talk to each other, but actually they'll love to have your input as well. What other things could you be looking at? Perhaps the order of the day. So quite a few elderly relatives are really, really keen to be there for what they see as being the really key parts of the wedding. They want to be there for the ceremony. They want to be there for the speeches, and they want to be there for the cake cutting. It's not disastrous to them if they're not there for the meal. They're very happy to wait for another day to have a lovely meal with their family and friends. So could you perhaps have your cake cutting and your speeches at the end of the drinks reception and before everyone goes in to sit down? I know it's a change to the order of the day, but you'll probably find that your best man and the father of the bride really, really appreciate the fact that they can get the speeches out of the way early and they can enjoy a drink with their meals. So just think about whether that will actually be an improvement to your wedding. And you never know, it may be the way weddings go in the future. One of the other things to be looking at is later on in the evening, what's your entertainment going to look like? So we've already touched on the fact that it's going to be hard to have that packed dance floor that we all love at a wedding. What are the alternatives? So perhaps having a longer meal, perhaps adding courses into the meal so that guests are at the table for longer, perhaps arranging for after dinner entertainment, so an after dinner speaker, some sort of entertainment that your guests can enjoy, possibly even going back to fireworks. So we've not seen many fireworks at weddings for a few years now, but perhaps we'll be going back to that more celebratory feel that we all enjoy of fireworks. That gets your guests outside and really helps with putting that social distancing in. And just think about throughout the reception, whether there are little ways that you can involve those guests that can't be there. So we've all seen how Zoom and Facebook Live and all of these platforms have suddenly become really, really, really popular and really, really easy for anyone of any generation to use. So think about whether you can incorporate it for your wedding. Can you get some iPad stands? Can you invest in some iPads? Can you borrow iPads from family and friends and put them on tables and allow guests that aren't there to join you by Zoom? So just start thinking about little things you can do like that. We are really, really excited to see how weddings are going to evolve over the next few months. We're looking at it amongst all of the desperately, desperately sad times of having to come to terms with the fact that your wedding is not going to be as you've always thought and as you planned, but as a positive opportunity to just look at making sure it's your wedding your way. We're very much about the idea about it being all about you and about how your day should be. And I'm sure that is something that you can still create together. It's not going to be the original wedding that you originally planned, but being different doesn't mean it doesn't have to be great. And it is going to be, no matter what happens, a fantastic day. And that's going to be the case because it happened no matter what. So go ahead, have those conversations, talk to each other, talk to close family and friends, get their thoughts, but make sure ultimately it's your decision. You can be excited about it. You can look forward still to your wedding day in 2020, and you can keep your plans on the table and make sure it works.